Welcome to Uncle's Channel. Thanks for watching today, and let's talk about Garfield Lasagna Party. Now, this game came out like a couple months ago, and it's basically a Mario Party ripoff with Garfield characters. And it's an okay game. The board game part is a little on the lackluster side. I'm not really a big fan of the board game part, but there are several really good mini games inside the collection. So today we're going to do a tier list ranking of all 32 games inside of Garfield Lasagna Party. Now, the first game you're going to come across is a game called Messy Memory, and just like it says, it's a memory game. You know, all these little food bowls around the edges here, and it shows you which items belong in which food bowl, and then it disappears and it scatters those items across the screen here. And you basically have to run around, pick these items up, and take them back to the food bowl. And it's an okay game. I mean, it's not a great game. It's just sort of a memory game, and there's not a lot to say about it. It's just sort of a boring game, and it's not one of my favorites, so I'm going to give this one a C ranking as an overall. Just a standard, run-of-the-mill, okay game. Next up, we have Forbidden Invasion. It's basically a first-person or a third-person shooter game, and you're basically walking around the house with your little vacuum cleaner and trying to suck up flies or suck up spiders as you see them. Now, as you're walking around, you're in sort of a third-person view behind your character or a shoulder view. When you see the particular spiders or the flies, you go into first-person view, and you aim around and suck them into your vacuum cleaner. It's a pretty fun little game. It's not like an amazing game, but there's nothing wrong with the game. I would say when you're playing the board game, you're not going to look forward to this one. But when it shows up, you're like, oh yeah, this one. I don't mind this one. So we're going to put it as a B ranking. A pretty good game. Next up, we have Frozen Treat, and I actually found this would be a good bit of fun. Basically, there's a dog here, and you're going to taunt the dog to run after you, and it runs after you. It crashes through these little bushes, and little candies come out of the bushes, and your job is to try to collect as many candies as you can. And so you have to taunt the dog to run through the bushes, or try to hit your opposing players, and there's actually some little bit of strategy involved, and I actually enjoyed the game quite a bit. So I'm going to put a Frozen Treat here. We're going to put it at a A ranking on our scale. Next up is Dangerous Descent, and I actually like this one a good bit as well. You're basically on this little sled here, and you're trying to slide down the mountain to escape the avalanche that's coming behind you. As you're going down the mountain, you have to avoid all these little rocks and such, and you have to collect these little lightning bolts to go faster. And you can crash into your opponents and try to knock them into, little embankments. And it's a fun little mini game. I like mini games where you can actually sort of attack your opponents and try to put them at a disadvantage, and this one definitely plays into that. And so I actually like this one a good bit, so we're going to put it as also a A ranking game. Next up is Presto Pizza, and this game reminds me a lot of a place we used to go to when I was a kid called Chuck E. Cheese, and you have this little ball game where you shoot these little balls out of your little gun at a clown, and you knock them over, and your goal is to hit as many clowns as you could. And in Presto Pizza, you basically try to take your pizza and throw it into appropriate ovens here. And it's a very similar format as that Chuck E. Cheese game, and you're basically just trying to throw your pizzas into the appropriate spots. Some ovens are worth more points than other ones, and it's a fun little game. There's nothing wrong with the game, nothing amazing about the game, just a fun little standard game. And so we're going to put those games right there in the B category. Next up is Perfect Profile, and Perfect Profile basically just shows you an image, and you have to go into that particular pose by pressing one button, and whoever goes into the pose the fastest gets the most points, and whoever does it the slowest gets the least amount of points. And you go through several rounds trying to get the most points, but the game really just boils down to pressing one button to do it quicker than the other players. It's sort of a boring game, not my favorite, but there's nothing wrong with the game, so we're going to put it as a C game because it does fall into the boring category. Next up is Dog Panic, and Dog Panic is very much like the Avalanche game earlier where you're trying to escape the dogs who are running after you. And as you run, you have to jump over these little crevices and slide under these little clotheslines. And, if you hit those obstacles, you slow down a little bit, and then, of course, the dogs will capture you. And your goal is just simply to make it to the end and make it to the end first. And at the end, you have a little spot where you have to sprint as quick as you can to really, blast through a little bit to escape the dogs. And it's an okay game. It's not as good as the Avalanche game, but it's very similar to it. And so we're going to put it as a B tier game right there in the middle. And then we have Snowball Fight. Snowball Fight is basically another first-person mode here, or a little over-the-shoulder mode. And you basically just sort of construct these little snowballs and throw them at your opponent. And that's pretty much the whole game. It reminds me of a game called South Park on the N64. And it had a little multiplayer mode very similar to this, except better. And this one's just sort of a lackluster game in my opinion. I mean, it's not a bad game, but it's not a good game or even an average game. I'd say it's a C tier game. Then we have a classic keep away game with Last Lasagna, and basically you have a little lasagna here and you're trying to run around the arena and hold on to the lasagna the longest. The other players can capture it by throwing tomatoes at you, making you stumble and fall. They can run into you, and it's just simply running away from the peers trying to keep the lasagna. I like these kind of games, and I always find them fun because they're sort of a frantic experience. Everybody chasing after someone and sort of yelling, working together. So I'm going to put it as an A tier game because I just think it's a lot of fun. And then we move to the other end of the spectrum of Catapulted Pie. And this one you basically have little pies you're trying to throw at the dog house further down the screen. And in order to charge the little catapult here, you have to rotate the control stick. And if you're not rotating, the power goes back down. And it's just really difficult to actually aim it and also get the power right to hit the doghouse. And it's just not a fun game, and it's very difficult to control. And I think most players are going to dislike this game. I know I did, and so I'm going to put it as a D tier game. I just don't like the game. But then we bounce back with Dog Dodge here, and Dog Dodge feels like a Mario Party game. And basically you're in a little arena here, and these little dogs come running at you, and you try to push your opponents into the dogs to get them knocked off the screen, or you know, you can just simply try to run and escape from the dogs. It reminds me a lot of that Mario Party game when you put the little shells in the arena and you try to avoid the shells. I mean, it's a really fun game. I mean, like I said earlier, I like these frantic games where everybody's running around, you know, the excitement is there, and this game definitely has it, so we're going to put it as an A tier game as well. And then we have Quick Veto, and Quick Veto once again goes into the first person mode, and you're basically running around the house here trying to find a particular set of items, and the items are not really hard to find, but they're sort of in odd little places. It's a very boring game. It's not fun. No one's going to look forward to Quick Veto. The name doesn't even make sense for the title of the game either, but it's just sort of a run around the house, try to find the items. I don't like it. I'm going to put it as a D tier game just because when it popped up, I just never had fun with it. And then we have a 100% Mario Party ripoff, which is Snowball Effect, where you're basically on these giant snowballs, and you try to ram into your opponents and knock them off the edge. And I mean, it is 100% the Mario Party game, no question about it. But it was always like one of my absolute favorite Mario Party games. It was the one I always came back to and played the most. And so for me, this is definitely going to be an S tier game, just because I've always loved this particular game. Then you have a game called Put a Layer on It, which is basically construction of lasagna or cooking a lasagna. It's sort of like the Overcooked series here, where you basically find little ingredients, put your ingredients on the little pot here, and of course you build your lasagna. And whoever can get the farthest along or construct the lasagna the first is the winner of the game. And it's an okay game. I don't dislike the game, but it's definitely just sort of an average game. And so we're going to put it as another B tier game. And then we have Treasure Hunt. And Treasure Hunt's a pretty standard little game here. You have basically little holes around the yard, and your goal is to go around and dig these holes up or continue digging into holes. And of course you find different treasures in them. If there's a little shiny thing beside the hole, you'll get more points for the treasure. And it's sort of, you know, running around trying to find which holes to go to, opening and shutting the doors here. It's a pretty fun game. It doesn't really hit that frantic part that I like. It's more of everybody just sort of doing their own thing. And so I'm going to put it as a B tier game because it just seems like an average game. And then we have a game called It's Time to Eat, which is basically a eating game where you try to press the buttons as fast as you can to combination. It'd be like X and O, or square and X, or triangle and circle. And you just press those combinations as fast as you can to eat the food that's in front of you. It's sort of fun to sort of see how fast you can push those two buttons. And there's a lot of Mario Party games that are very similar to this, but they were always just sort of average games to me. And so we're going to put that as a B tier game as well. And then we have a game called Rodeo Drive. And Rodeo Drive is basically you're on this little cow here, and you get to charge up, and you get to make the cow buck to try to hit the other players. And every player has a certain number of hearts, and you try to attack those players, take their hearts away. It's a fun little frantic game, trying to, you know, attack each other, run around, get yourself charged up. It's a good game, and there's not a Mario Party game like this, so it's actually an original game as well. But I'm going to put it as an A tier game, because I think it is a really fun game. And then we have a game called Under the Spotlight, where basically you have all these lasagna trays out in the yard here, and John has a little searchlight, and he's trying to scan around the yard, searching for who's eating his lasagna, and you have to run from one tray to another to eat as many lasagna cakes or lasagna pieces as you can, and then when that place is gone, you have to run to another one, all while avoiding John's spotlight. Whoever has the most lasagna is the winner of the game, and to me, this was a really fun game. I actually enjoyed this one quite a bit, and so we're going to put it as an A tier game as well. That's one that could almost borderline into S tier, but it just sort of depends on, I guess, who you're playing with. And then we have a game called TikTok, and this one's very similar to the hot lasagna game we had earlier, where you try to hold on to the lasagna the longest, but in this one, you have an alarm clock, and you're trying to pass it off as quick as you can. And when you have the alarm clock, you're chasing after everybody, trying to run into them to give them the alarm clock. When you don't have the alarm clock, you're trying to run through, open doors, shut doors, trying to get away from them, you know, create different paths. It's a fun game. I actually found this to be one of the more fun games in the game. And so to me, this is the only other one so far anyway that we're going to put in the S tier, because it just has that franticness about it. I love the opening door part of it, just sort of making traps, trying to, you know, lead people on. It's just a really fun game. And then we have a game called Catfish, which is essentially a fishing game. You throw your little casting line out there, and you try to catch the bigger fish. The bigger fish are worth more points. It doesn't control badly or anything. It's just a very, very boring game. And so I'm going to put it as a C tier game, because it's just not even an average game. It's just so boring. Up next is a game called Go Fetch, and you're basically trying to run around the arena, pick up as many Pokies as you can, and place them back in your particular cat bed. And as you're doing this, you can not only just walk over there and place it in there, you can also throw the Pokie in there to make it a little bit quicker. You can steal Pokies from other people's nests as well. You can get Pokie power-ups, put shields in front of your nest. There's a lot of different mechanics about this particular one, and it's a frantic, fun mess as you're playing through. I guess it's not mess, frantic, fun excitement. That's the word we're going to go for. And to me, this is another one I would put as an S tier game because when it came up, I was always excited for this particular game. And then we have another boring one called Bulk Pizza, where you basically have these little pizzas that open up and they show you how many points they are. They shut back and they scramble them all up, and you just try to pick out whichever pizza is worth the most points. It's not a fun game. It's just simply a boring game, so we're going to put it as a C tier game. But there's nothing broken with the controls or anything. And then we have a game called It Swings, where you basically are a golfer and you're trying to hit a golf ball out and hit the little balloons here. They have different point values. And this game is incredibly hard to control. As you're trying to do it, you really just sort of charge your golf swing up, and you can't lower the swing once it goes up so far. You can just let it go, and if you charge too much, you've just missed your balloon. It's difficult to control, and even if it was easier to control, I can't even say it would be a lot of fun even then. But combine those two factors together, and this is going to be a D tier game for sure. And then we have a game called Catch It, which is basically a little piece of toast pops out of the toaster here. You have to press the button the fastest to capture the toast. Occasionally a burnt piece of toast pops out. If you do that, you get stunned for a round. It's an okay game. It's sort of on the boring side, and it takes an eternity to actually play this game. This is like one of the longest games in the entire game, just because you have to get 3 toast, and then you have to wait for everyone else to get 3 toast, and there's a first, second, third, fourth place. It just takes forever, and boy, it's close to a D tier. C, I'm going to say it's D tier because the game takes forever, and it's not a really fun game, and you never look forward to it coming up. And then you have one called Roll the Ball, where you have this little snowball, and you run around the platform or run around the area on top of more snow to make your snowball even bigger, and then you can basically push yourself into other players to stun them. And there's just something about it like that makes you feel like a jerk while you're playing, because you knock the other players and keep them from building their snowballs. And I think it's Garfield's little smoke look on his face as you're doing it. And there's just something really charming about this game, and it really captures the energy or the feeling of what a Mario Party or a party game should be like, because part of the fun is just sort of being a jerk to someone else for a little while. And this one here, it's an A tier game. I like it a lot because it captures the spirit of Garfield and a party game all in one, so it's an A tier game. And then there's spring cleaning. Spring cleaning is basically you have your little quadrant here, and you're trying to push all of the junk out into someone else's quadrant. And you can do a little like boost move where you can really throw it into their quadrant, and you have to charge that up as you go. But it's basically just trying to clean out your square. And the more human players you have, the more fun it is. But it's a above average game, and so I'm going to put it as an A tier game. And then we have a game called Good Boy here, where a dog is coming down the hallway, and you want to get the dog as close as you can to you before you pull out the little bone here to distract him. And the closer he is to you, the more points you're going to get. And it just didn't seem to work really well for me, because I'd wait until the dog got close to me, pull out the bone, and I'd still get captured sometimes anyway. So there's like a certain cutoff. We don't know where that cutoff is at. And it just didn't make sense, because sometimes it seemed like I won first place and I didn't win first place. The directions were very unclear for this game, and perhaps with better directions it would be better. But for me, it's a D tier game. And up next is Cat's Band. And Cat's Band, you're all on the little fence here, and you're playing like a little jazz band song. And it's like Guitar Hero. The little notes are coming down from the top, and you have to press the note at a certain time in order to get it to activate. And there's, if you do it closer to time, you get more points. Not on time, fewer points, not at all, no points. And it's a fun little game. There's not the frantic energy that I like, but I really love the scenery because it's definitely a Garfield scene here. You're on the little fence post, and that was in the TV show quite a bit. And so to me, if there's a little more frantic energy, I'd probably put it as an S tier, but it's close, but that's going to be an A tier game. Next up is Slice and Dice. And Slice and Dice, you have a pepperoni pizza here, and your goal is to slice the pizza in certain ways that every slice has 3 pepperonis on it. And I would do it a lot of times where I felt like there were the right number of pepperonis on it, and it didn't count them, and it just seemed like the game was a little bit off. But even if the game performed correctly, in my opinion, it wouldn't be a fun game. And so to me, I'm putting this as a D tier game. I didn't like it, and I did feel like controls were a little bit off. And then there's Featherweight. In Featherweight, you have this little conveyor belt bringing food to you, and you basically get more points for more food that comes into your little can here, your little opening. And as the food's coming to you, if it's a bad food like a pepper, you can drop that down in a little hole here, or you can direct it to another player to try to make it more frantic for them. And there's that little bit of combat spirit, which I do like in the game, but it's still a little bit on the boring side. But since it did have the combat, we're going to put it a solid B tier game, right in the middle. And then there's a game called Super Cat. Super Cat's like the old Snake games, because as you're going around, you have a little trail behind you, and your goal here is to basically cut people off where they run into your trail, and then that's when they get out. And there's multiple rounds you go through, but it's a fun little party game where you're running around trying to get them to run into you, run to your trail. It reminds me of that game called Astro Bears, which is a really fun little indie game that's out there. But to me, this was one of the better games in the collection, and I'd put it as an A tier game. And finally, we have a game called Aspiring Artist, where you're basically trying to trace a little line along the wall here. And as you're tracing it, there's a certain time limit because it pushes you along, or you can go faster. And I don't know, there's something fun about this game. I've always liked the little tracing games, whether it's on this or Mario Party. They've always been fun for me. And so I think it's a little above average. I mean, it's not an S tier, but it's above average. So I'm going to put it as an A tier as well. And it's a good little game. So there we have it, a full ranking of all the mini games inside of Lasagna Party. And there's a pretty decent number of S tier games and A tier games inside of a Garfield game. This is definitely better than Garfield Kart and most of the other Garfield games out there. There's a lot to really enjoy inside this game. I mean, just look how many S tier games and A tier games there are. And B tier games aren't bad. They're just sort of run the mill. There is still a decent number of C tier and D tier, but truth be told, if you go through the Mario Party games, there's going to be some C tier games and D tier mini games in those games as well. And so there's probably a few more, duds inside the Garfield collection as an overall, true, but there is still a lot of fun to be had inside of Garfield Lasagna Party. Is it worth the $40? Probably not, because the overall board game is not a whole lot of fun. You're pretty much just buying it for the mini games. If you can get it for like 20 bucks or less, I think it's a fun little party game for you and your friends or you and your kids to play through. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check my other videos listed up above. And as always, go out there, find a great game to play. Just simply have a great rest of the day.